Hello there and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is L24 World News Program. I'm Abdurrahim Kashur and these are your headlines. Zionist occupation forces stormed the courtyard of Al-Aqsa Mosque for the fourth consecutive day. Russia calls on the entire Ukrainian army to lay down their arms and the last defenders of Mariupol to end their senseless resistance. Up to 500 Rohingya refugees fled from Malaysian detention centers. Zionist occupation forces stormed the courtyard of Al-Aqsa Mosque for the fourth consecutive day this morning in preparation for the settlers' collective intrusion on the occasion of the Hebrew Passover holiday. The occupation police deployed proceeded to remove the worshippers from the settlers' path while besieging those in Al-Aqsa Mosque after closing it. The settlers stormed the mosque in the form of groups, carried out provocation tours and performed the ritual under the strict protection of the occupation police. And to talk more about the situation, I'm joined live via Skype by Hisham Munawar, a Palestinian writer and international relations researcher from Turkey. Thank you, Hisham, for joining us.
Thank you, Billy.
These brutal attacks, Mr. Hisham, on the Muslim in Al-Aqsa Mosque have drawn a great wave of condemnation from the Muslim world. So what can you tell us about the drivers behind Zionists stepping up attacks on Gaza and the West Bank?
Actually, there is a escalation of, storming to Aqsa, to abusing the Palestinian people in courts, in Jerusalem, in West Bank. It hasn't stopped since the beginning of Ramadan month, which means a lot for Palestinians, which means a lot for all the nations, which whether it was Arabs or Muslims. So, especially in this month, the Israeli forces, the Zionist leaders, they are trying to storm to the Aqsa Mosque every day, trying to provocate the Palestinians who are trying to guard their holy places during Ramadan. They are trying to do their ritual, Islamic ritual, normal rituals during Ramadan, which is fasting, which is Taraweeh prayers every day. They are trying to provocate them to initiate fights, to initiate clashes between them, and to try to put allusions to the world, in other words, that Palestinians are abusing their holy places to attack the armies, Israeli forces, and try to abstain other religions, followers like Jewish people, from let's say performance their prayers, performance their rituals in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Unfortunately, this is the second year Ramadan month coming along with Jewish holidays, which the Israeli government and Zionist leaders trying to abuse this occasion to provocate and escalate the abusing for the Palestinian people, and trying to convince to strengthen their sovereignty on the Holy Aqsa, and trying to publicize to all the world that the Aqsa Mosque is under the Muslims, care, are trying to clashes, are trying to have more, threats.
Sorry to cut you train of thought, Mr. Hisham, but these attacks happen occasionally, and not occasionally, but always repeatedly in Ramadan. And are we on the verge of the new round of conflict between Palestinian nation or, let me say, and against Zionist entity?
Yes, unfortunately, the Zionist government is trying to escalate this clashes to, let's say, full clashes, maybe a new intifada, trying to let's say apply century of deal of century, as they say or as they call it in the media. They are trying to accuse the Palestinian people that they are extremists, that they are trying to abuse they are trying to abstain the Jewish people from their rights to do their rituals. They are trying to propagate, and they are trying to initiate a new, let's say, intifada in West Bank and in Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and trying to let's say, export to all over the world that the Palestinians are the one who should blame for these provocations, for these escalations. They are trying to put the Palestinian people, to put their own holy places in in West Bank, even in Al-Hebron or Al-Khalil city. They are trying to provocate the Palestinians there in Al-Khalil mosque, and to abstain the Muslims from their rights to do their rituals during Ramadan.
Quite understood, Mr. Hisham. Thank you so much for your intervention. You join us live from Turkey. Russia on Tuesday called on the entire Ukrainian army to lay down their arms and the last defenders of Mariupol to end their senseless resistance, a call that comes as Moscow seems to have launched what it calls a new phase of its military operation in Ukraine. Nabil Khazini has more to tell.
In Mariupol, the only few Ukrainian soldiers are now asked to lay down their arms. The Russian forces, while they continue to take control of the city, have made an ultimatum to Ukraine soldiers to surrender, and they will be safe.
This is our call to the world. This could well be the last call of our lives. We may be living our last days, even our last hours. The enemy is 10 times more numerous than us. It has the advantage in the air, in the artillery, and in its ground forces. In terms of equipment and tanks, we defend only one element, the Azovstal factory, where in addition to military personnel, there are also civilians who are victims of this war.
The Russian Defense Ministry says Russian forces are opening a humanitarian corridor for Ukrainian soldiers to leave Mariupol.
We call on the official authorities in Kiev to be reasonable, to order the fighters to stop the senseless resistance and leave the epicenter of the resistance.
The situation in the southern Ukrainian city is horrific. It will add another page to history books of how war can turn entire cities into nothing. And while civilians in the port city continue to hide in underground shelters, Kiev has announced that a preliminary agreement has been reached with Russia to evacuate nearly 6,000 civilians from Mariupol on Wednesday.
I've been there all the time, until they threw me out. They said to leave and the building was about to blow up. And they threw us out. And so we left.
Last week, more than 1,000 Ukrainian soldiers surrendered in Mariupol, but several hundred others, according to pro-Russian separatists, are still in the huge Azovstal factory.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Ukraine did not appreciate the goodwill gesture when the Russian forces were withdrawn from the outskirts of Kiev. Lavrov stressed that special operation in Ukraine aims to liberate the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics has now begun its new phase.
Operation in the east of Ukraine is aimed, as was announced from the very beginning, to fully liberate the Donetsk and Lugansk republics. And this operation will continue. It is beginning, another stage of this operation is beginning, and I'm sure this will be a very important moment of this entire special operation.
In the same line of thought, and at a meeting with the top military brass, Russia's Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu said that the Russian military has consistently implemented the plan to fully liberate the Donetsk and Luhansk People Republics and accused the US and other Western nations of supplying Ukraine with weapons so that it continues fighting until the last Ukrainian.
The Russian army is fulfilling the tasks set by the commander-in-chief in the course of the special military operation. The plan to fully liberate the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics is being consistently implemented, and measures are being taken to establish a peaceful life. The Russian servicemen participating in the operation show courage and heroism in the fulfillment of their military duty. The United States and Western countries are doing everything to drag out this special military operation as much as possible. The growing supplies of foreign weapons clearly signal their intention to provoke the Kyiv regime to keep fighting until the last Ukrainian.
Ukraine has received fighter jets and spare parts to strengthen its air force, said Pentagon spokesman John Kirby, declining to specify the number of the countries that provide the aircraft. Kirby also did not specify the type of aircraft supplied to Ukrainian army, which had been asking for war plans for weeks, but he implied that they were Russian-made aircraft.
I would just say, without getting into what other nations are providing, that they have received additional platforms and parts to be able to increase their fleet size. They have received additional aircraft and aircraft parts to help them, get more aircraft in the air. I would say we certainly have helped with the transshipment of some additional spare parts that have helped with their aircraft needs, but we have not transported whole aircraft. I'm careful not to detail battlefield tactics here because we're not on the ground, and so our visibility is, quite frankly, somewhat limited.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres denounced the Russian offensive in eastern Ukraine and called on both sides to stop fighting for a full day as humanitarian pause on the occasion of Orthodox Easter. Let's take a listen.
For all these life or death reasons, I call on Russians and Ukrainians to silence the guns and forge a path to safety for so many at immediate risk. The 4-day Easter period should have a moment to unite around saving lives and furthering dialogue to end the suffering in Ukraine. The humanitarian pause would provide the necessary conditions to meet two crucial imperatives. First, safe passage of all civilians willing to leave the areas of current and expected confrontation. Second, beyond humanitarian operations already taking place, a pause will allow for the safe delivery of life-saving humanitarian aid to people in the hardest hit areas.
In a meeting in the Russian capital, Moscow, the Russian President Vladimir Putin and Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan hailed the process of normalizing relations between Turkey and Armenia. Turkey and Armenia have had no diplomatic or commercial relations for 30 years. The talks are the first attempt to restore links since 2009 peace occurred. The two leaders also expressed their support for the implementation of the agreement signed between Russia, Armenia and Azerbaijan in order to continue constructive work and ensure stability, security and economic development in the region. Rescue operations are continuing, and since the start of the deadly floods that hit the Durban region in eastern South Africa more than a week ago, 10,000 soldiers have been deployed as reinforcement after declaring a state of national disaster, which should allow the release of exceptional resources. President Cyril Ramaphosa dispatched his main ministers to the city of Durban and to the province of KwaZulu-Natal. There are now at least 448 dead and 40,000 homeless. 3 explosions struck a school for boys in neighborhood of Kabul on Tuesday. The neighborhood, which is heavily inhabited by members of Hazara Shia minority, and it is said that it has already been targeted several times. Wounded were taken to hospital. At least 6 people were killed and 24 others injured after the blast. According to immigration officials, up to 500 Rohingya refugees fled from a Malaysian detention center early Wednesday following a protest, but the vast majority were recaptured. Islam Seed has more to tell.
According to the Malaysian Immigration Department, 528 Rohingya people fled after protest, breaching a black door at a temporary detention camp in northern Penang state. Police and other agencies were called in, and 362 inmates were recaptured.
The incident happened at 4:30 a.m. They broke out by breaking the block's doors and grill barriers. The officers on duty activated the standard operating procedures by contacting the Royal Malaysia Police and related agencies for support.
Penang police had said 6 prisoners were killed after were hit by cars while attempting to cross the highway. The victims were 2 males, 2 women, a boy, and a girl. Before the riot, the site housed 664 Rohingya refugees, including 137 children. Illegal immigrants are generally housed in these detention centers, and there are stories about the terrible living conditions inside these camps. Malaysia is a major destination for Muslim Rohingya escaping Myanmar or seeking to escape the misery of refugee camps in Bangladesh. Even though Malaysia does not award refugee status, it does host over 180,000 refugees and asylum seekers registered with the UNHCR, including over 100,000 Rohingya and other Myanmar ethnic groups. Thousands more remain unauthorized after unlawfully entering the nation by sea.
1 person has been killed and at least 10 injured after police in Sri Lanka opened fire at people protesting fuel price increases. The protests are still ongoing, but the government is failing to recover the economy of the country. Miriam Zian on Watch Follow.
1 person has been shot dead in a first fatality since weeks-long protests, and several others were wounded during demonstrations in Sri Lanka on Tuesday. Police fired live ammunition and tear gas at a crowd that blockaded a railway line in Rambikana to protest oil shortages and unprecedented inflation, but activists criticized the move, saying that it is not an excuse to fire civilians. And on Wednesday, thousands of bank, port and health employees demonstrated in front of the main railway station in Colombo, condemning the police shooting and demanding that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his government to resign. The island nation of 22 million is suffering from prolonged power cuts and endured months of shortages of essentials such as food, cooking gas, fuel and medicine.
The protest is being held well. Irrelevant to the number of protests that are held on the road, all this requires a political solution. It is the politicians that have dragged the country to this level. The end result of our struggle should be to appoint a people-centric, intelligent government that is not corrupt.
U.S. Ambassador Julie Chung and UN Resident Coordinator Hannah Singer-Hamdi urged restraint from all sides and called on the authorities to ensure the people's right to peaceful protest. Despite the anger expressed in weeks of growing protests, Rajapaksa has resisted the call to resign and is likely to retain power, resulting in a political impasse.
Tam Tachi, Hong Kong pro-democracy activist, was sentenced to 14 months in prison and fined with $5,000 after being convicted of 14 charges, including uttering seditious words, holding or convening an unauthorized assembly, and refusing to obey an order given by an authorized officer. According to media, Tam is the first to be tried for seditious in Hong Kong since its 1997 handover to China. China announced Tuesday that it has signed a broad security agreement with the Solomon Islands, while several Western countries led by the United States are concerned about Beijing's military ambitions in the Pacific. Hassan Burkan has more details in this report.
The Solomon Islands have become a new and unexpected point of competition between China and Australia and its Western allies. Officials from the Solomon Islands and the People's Republic of China have signed a bilateral security cooperation agreement between the two countries, declared Tuesday Wang Wenbin, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson.
The foreign ministers of China and the Solomon Islands recently officially signed the Security Cooperation Framework Agreement. I have not heard that the Chinese foreign minister has visited the islands of Solomon.
As strong concerns across the Pacific about where this is heading, a high-ranking U.S. delegation from the White House and the State Department is heading this week to the Solomon Islands, the archipelago in the South Pacific, with a population of just under 700,000.
And there is strong concern across the Pacific and with allies and partners, particularly the United States, about where this is heading. but it only underscores and highlights the reason for the actions we have been taking for many years. And
the Solomon Islands Prime Minister said that they do not have any external adversaries and that the security cooperation is based on mutual respect for sovereignty and in compliance with domestic and international law.
Solomon Islands do not have any external adversaries, nor is the framework directed at any countries or external alliances, rather at our own internal security situation from within the state. It is based on mutual respect for sovereignty and in compliance with domestic and international law.
At the end of 2021, the Solomon Islands witnessed riots with casualties, fueled by discontent of part of the population with the growing influence of China. Chinese-owned companies were vandalized and burned in Honiara, the capital of the archipelago, about 1,500 kilometers from Australia.
Last Monday, the governor of Metropolitan Region of Santiago announced a protocol for rationing water in the capital to address a record-breaking 12-year drought. The protocol consists of a rotation cuts to the water supply across various sectors of the city for a period of no more than 24 hours each. Managing water access for Chile's fast-growing population is becoming increasingly difficult, and experts identify Santiago as the country in the West with the most severe water crisis.
We have to plan the water we're going to get to know what irrigation capacity we're going to have. Today we have a water deficit of about 87% in the park compared to previous years. In previous years, we could say we had a lot of water. 15 years ago, the park had enough water to irrigate everything.
At the G7 finance ministers meeting in Washington on Wednesday, the West is planning a unified diplomatic snub to protest Russian military incursion, while some in Western capitals says that Russian activists should exclude Moscow from global summits. Others in group of 20 major economies, most notably China and Indonesia, which is chairing the group this year, disagree. The International Monetary Fund on Tuesday lowered its global growth forecast to 3.6% for 2022, down by 0.8 point from those of January. A revision justified by the conflict in Ukraine, the sanctions imposed against Russia, and the lockdowns implemented in China to stop the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. The IMF added that soaring prices of food, energy, and other goods could lead to social unrest, particularly in vulnerable developing countries.
Compared to our January forecast, we have revised our projection for global growth downwards to 3.6% in both 2022 and 2023.
Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune received the ambassador of Saudi Arabia to Algeria, Abdullah bin Nasser Abdullah Al Busairi. Saudi ambassador conveyed to President Tebboune a message from his brother, the custodian of the two holy mosques, King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, in which he expressed the feelings of brotherhood, praising the approach of consultation and coordination and between the two brotherly countries. In true message, the Saudi monarch also expressed his main opinion regarding the unity of the Arab ranks and the joint work for the advancement of the Arab nation. Saudi King also affirmed to the Algerian president that his country's knees on its firm stance on the Palestinian cause to establish the state of Palestine on the 67 border. Airline companies in the United States have made the wearing of sanitary masks optional on their plans. The flows immediately in a judge's decision to outlaw this federal requirement on public transportation in the North American country, Washington said that decision will be applied on the flights in the United States and on some international flights, depending on the rules in the country of arrival. Billy, the 81-year-old former Brazilian football star, has been hospitalized in Sao Paulo since Monday as part of the treatment of colon cancer discovered previous September. Albert Einstein Hospital said in a statement that the health state of the king is good and stable, and he should leave the hospital in the coming days. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us. Take care of yourself and have a blessed evening.